My name is Lila, I am 35 years old, and I am the mother of two wonderful 10-year-old twins, Theo and Maya. 2 years ago, after my divorce, we moved back into my parents' house. At first, this seemed like a blessing. With 12-hour shifts at the pediatric hospital, I needed support, and they offered to help. My relationship with them had never been easy, but I tried to make the arrangement work. Everything shifted when my brother Colin and his wife Jenna welcomed their baby boy. From that moment, it felt as though my children had become invisible. I never thought my own parents would betray us in such a complete way. If you are following along, share in the comments where you are watching from and subscribe to join our storytelling community for more real-life drama. When my husband Marcus and I ended our 12-year marriage, I was devastated, both emotionally and financially. Our life had depended on his salary as a software engineer, while I worked part-time as a nurse, so I could be more present for the twins. After the divorce, I was left with shared custody, a small amount of alimony, and the sudden responsibility of working full-time to provide for us. My parents, Elaine and Howard, suggested I stay with them as a temporary solution. My father reassured me, placing his hand on my shoulder and saying it would be just until you are back on your feet. Despite our complicated history, I felt grateful. Growing up, I had always been the one to follow rules, to meet expectations, while my younger brother Colin was treated as the golden child who could do no wrong. I dedicated 8 years to completing my nursing degree, specializing in pediatrics, because caring for children had always been my passion. My path was steady, never glamorous. Colin, however, dropped out of college, launched a tech company financed by our parents, and by the age of 32 was already earning a 6-figure income. Their favoritism toward him was so constant that I almost stopped noticing it. Theo and Maya each carried their own unique strengths. Theo was creative, often drawing or building, with a sensitivity that sometimes made life harder for him. Maya was bold and athletic, outspoken and confident, always ready to defend what she believed was fair. Even after the divorce and the move, both of them were doing well in school. Our arrangement with my parents seemed manageable in the beginning. They converted their home office into a bedroom for the twins, while I moved into the guest room. I paid toward groceries, did most of the cooking, and taught my children to respect their grandparents' space and routines. My 12-hour shifts, sometimes overnight, meant my parents often stepped in for school drop-offs and pickups. The plan was simple. Within a year, I would save enough for a deposit and first month's rent so we could move into our own place. I worked carefully with money, picking up extra shifts whenever possible and saving every bit I could. The housing market was expensive, but I was determined to restore stability for my children. That determination was shaken when Colin and Jenna's son, little Oliver, arrived. My parents' excitement for him went far beyond what I expected. They converted the formal dining room into a nursery, even though Colin and Jenna owned a spacious 4-bedroom home across town. They purchased costly baby gear that would only be used occasionally during visits. My mother even began canceling her commitments to me and the twins whenever Colin called. She would remind me that your brother needs more support right now. He is new to being a parent. The irony that I had been raising children alone for 2 years without such indulgence seemed lost on her. At first, I tried to stay patient. A newborn brings joy, and this was their first grandson. After all, Theo and Maya had been their only grandchildren for a full decade. I encouraged them to be understanding, explaining that Oliver required extra attention because of his age. The favoritism showed itself slowly. That Christmas, Oliver's gifts were noticeably more expensive than those my children received. My parents constantly remarked that Oliver looked just like Colin had as a baby, while Theo and Maya were often compared to their father rather than me. The remarks were small, but they piled up. To keep our bond strong, I created special time just for us. On my days off, we would go to the park or watch movies together in my bedroom. I even taped a savings chart to the bathroom wall, letting the kids track our progress toward getting our own home. I would reassure them again and again, by Christmas, we will finally move into our own place. As spring gave way to summer, the tension inside the house grew heavier. My parents began criticizing my parenting choices constantly, from the food I served, to bedtimes, to how much screen time was allowed. Meanwhile, Colin and Jenna could do no wrong, even when they arrived hours late for family dinners or canceled at the last minute. I walked a careful line, trying to protect Theo and Maya from realizing how differently they were being treated while also attempting to keep peace in the household. I knew I still needed my parents' support because the cost of childcare would erase my savings. By the end of summer, I felt hopeful again. My savings account had grown steadily, and by my calculations, we could afford a modest two-bedroom apartment by November. I told myself that we only needed 3 more months of keeping quiet, 3 more months of reminding my children that we were still only guests in their grandparents' home, 3 more months of watching my parents dote on Oliver while ignoring Theo and Maya's achievements. What I could not foresee was how much worse everything would become before those 3 months finally passed. The situation grew far more intense in September when Colin called for a family meeting. He and Jenna sat comfortably at our parents' kitchen table, baby Oliver on his lap, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than what I spent on groceries for an entire week. With a smile directed at our parents rather than at me, Colin made an announcement. He said they finally had exciting news. They were beginning the major renovation project on their home, the one they had been discussing for years. My mother immediately clasped her hands together with delight. Jenna added quickly, bouncing Oliver gently on her knee, that they would need a place to stay during construction, explaining it should last about 6 to 8 weeks. Before I even had time to respond, my father nodded enthusiastically and declared that they would of course stay here, since there was plenty of room. I tried to interject, clearing my throat and reminding everyone that space was already tight with the 5 of us, my parents, my children, and me. My mother gave me a sharp look and said firmly that family must support one another, insisting it was only temporary. Just like that, the decision was made. No one cared how I felt about it. No one thought about what it would mean for Theo and Maya. No one mentioned that my own stay had also been described as temporary, yet we had already been there for nearly 2 years. Colin and Jenna moved in the following weekend. My father helped set up a portable crib for Oliver in their room, although he had never once offered to assist with assembling beds for my twins when we first arrived. My mother cleared out an entire closet for Jenna's clothes, while I had spent months living out of suitcases before finally buying myself a small dresser. The differences were immediate and unsettling. Theo and Maya were suddenly instructed to keep their voices down throughout the day because Oliver needed naps. Their toys, already confined to their bedroom and a small corner of the living room, were now considered clutter and frequently boxed away. The television, which they had been allowed to watch for an hour after school, became permanently tuned to shows Jenna preferred. One evening, after a long shift, I came home to find Maya sitting alone on the back porch, upset. I sat beside her and asked what was wrong. With teary eyes, she explained that Grandma had told her to stop jumping rope in the backyard because she was being too loud, even though Oliver had been awake in the living room with Jenna the whole time. It crushed me to hear her say that she felt silenced for no real reason. Later that same week, Theo came home excited about his school art project. He had been chosen to represent his class in a district-wide exhibition and rushed to show his grandmother. Instead of celebrating his achievement, she brushed him off with a dismissive wave, saying she was too busy helping Jenna choose new curtains for their house. I saw my son's face fall, and in that moment, something inside me hardened. That night, once the children were asleep, I tried to raise the issue with my parents. I told them that I understood Colin's family needed help, but I was worried about how Theo and Maya were being treated. I explained that my children felt unimportant and overlooked. My father frowned and said they were simply being too sensitive, insisting that children need to learn babies require more attention. He reminded me that Oliver was not even present most of the day. I pointed out that Oliver attended daycare while Colin was at work and Jenna picked him up later, so my twins were not asking for attention during those hours. My mother let out an exaggerated sigh and said that I had always been jealous of my brother, adding she had hoped I would have grown out of it by now. Her words stunned me. Was this really how they saw me, as a jealous sister rather than a concerned mother? The following weeks brought even more tension. Jenna began rearranging items in the kitchen without asking, criticized the healthy snacks I bought for my twins, and often left her laundry in the machine for days. Colin behaved as though he owned the house, hosting watch parties with his friends in the living room without checking if anyone else planned to use the space. One evening, I overheard Colin and my father talking about money. Colin mentioned that the renovation might need to be extended because the contractor had discovered problems with the foundation. Without hesitation, my father told him they could stay as long as necessary, reminding him that this was his home, too. I stood there quietly, thinking about how those words had never once been spoken to me, even though I contributed to groceries, cooked, and cleaned. Instead, I was constantly reminded that our stay was conditional and temporary. The breaking point came during a Sunday dinner in early October. My mother had prepared an entire spread of Colin's favorite dishes, none of which were things my children enjoyed. When Theo politely asked if there was something else he might have, my mother scolded him and said he was being ungrateful. She reminded him sternly that, when she was growing up, children ate whatever was placed in front of them. Later in the meal, Oliver threw his plate onto the floor, and everyone laughed indulgently. Jenna excused his behavior, saying he was simply exploring his world and made no attempt to clean up. The double standard was so glaring that even my usually diplomatic son noticed. Whispering to me, he asked why Oliver was allowed to throw food while he could not even request a sandwich. I had no answer for him. Not long after, I discovered that Theo and Maya's artwork had been removed from the refrigerator. In its place, there was a printout of Oliver's daycare schedule and multiple photos of him. When I asked about it, Jenna explained she needed the information displayed prominently and assumed no one would mind if she shifted things around. From then on, my children avoided the shared areas of the house. They preferred the small sanctuary of their bedroom, where at least they had some sense of control. To give them relief, I began taking them to the public library after school whenever I was not working. It became a quiet refuge where they did not have to worry about being shushed or dismissed. One particularly difficult shift at the hospital left me visibly drained, and a coworker noticed. As we charted together, Priya asked gently if everything was all right at home. I surprised myself by sharing the entire story. She listened with empathy before making an observation that stayed with me. She said it sounded as though my parents had created a home where Colin's family were treated as honored guests, while my children and I were regarded as nothing more than unwanted tenants. That is not a healthy environment for any of you. Priya's words echoed in my mind. She was right, and hearing it spoken aloud forced me to confront how normalized this dysfunctional dynamic had become in my life. That evening, instead of driving straight home after my hospital shift, I circled the neighborhood and called a realtor friend. I told her that I needed to get my children out of this situation, and I needed to do it sooner rather than later. By mid-October, life in my parents' home had declined beyond anything I could have imagined. Colin and Jenna had completely taken over the household, and my parents supported them enthusiastically. The renovation of their home, originally expected to last 6 to 8 weeks, had been extended indefinitely. Whenever I asked for details, Colin offered only vague explanations. One afternoon, I came home to discover that my parents had bought an expensive high chair for Oliver, one that cost nearly $400 according to the box left in the recycling bin. This came just days after they had complained about the cost of Theo's asthma medication, which my insurance only partially covered. When I questioned the expense, my mother explained that Oliver needed to be comfortable while eating at their house. I reminded her sharply that Theo needed to breathe, unable to keep the edge from my tone. She looked at me as though I were being unreasonable and told me that she and my father lived on a fixed income and could not cover everything for my children. The fact that I paid for all of my kids' expenses while also contributing to household bills seemed invisible to her. What also went unnoticed was that Colin and Jenna, both high earners, had not contributed a single cent toward expenses during their stay. Not long after, another incident unfolded. Maya was practicing her clarinet for band class. She had been playing for barely 15 minutes when Jenna stormed into the room, irritated. She demanded that Maya stop, saying Oliver needed to nap and that she had an important call in 10 minutes. Maya apologized and put her instrument away, but later she cried, telling me she had been practicing during the exact time scheduled by her teacher for their virtual session. Missing it meant she would not be prepared for her upcoming evaluation. I attempted to speak with Jenna calmly, suggesting we create a schedule that worked for everyone. Her reply was dismissive. She told me that her work calls and Oliver's nap times had to take priority, and Maya could practice her little hobby whenever she wanted. I bit back my anger, though inside it stung. Maya's clarinet was not just a hobby, it was her passion, and her teacher had already noted that she had real talent. But in this house, nothing my children did ever seem to matter. Theo was struggling too. His teacher reached out with concerns about his growing withdrawal and slipping grades. My once lively, social boy had become quiet and anxious. When I gently asked him what was wrong, he admitted he was afraid of making mistakes at home. He whispered that Grandma and Grandpa always seemed upset with him and Maya, but never once with Oliver, Uncle Colin, or Aunt Jenna. To cope, I took on additional shifts at the hospital. Partly, it was to earn more money for our escape, but partly, it was to avoid being in the house at all. My parents interpreted this as me shirking family responsibility, while Colin and Jenna seemed relieved to have me out of the way. The tension reached its peak during a family dinner in late October. My parents had invited extended relatives, including my Aunt Carla, who had always been warm and supportive of me and the twins. Throughout the meal, my mother went on and on about Oliver's remarkable progress. She proudly declared that at only 9 months old, he was already attempting to stand. She compared him to Colin, saying he had been an early walker as well, and claimed that some children were simply born with athletic ability. Then she turned to Theo and remarked that it was unfortunate he had not inherited that from his father's side of the family. She reminded us that Marcus had been athletic, implying Theo had missed out on something he should have received. I saw Theo's expression crumble before he forced himself to mask it. The implication was painfully clear. Any strengths my children displayed came from their father, never from me, while Oliver's gifts were considered proof of my brother's supposedly superior genes. I glanced across the table and saw Aunt Carla's concerned look. After dinner, she quietly pulled me aside and asked how long things had been this way. I admitted that favoritism had always existed, but it had grown much worse since Colin and his family had moved in. She squeezed my hand and told me that this was not healthy for my children, repeating the same warning Priya had given me. She said Theo and Maya deserved far better than being treated as second-class family members. Tears threatened as I assured her that I was working on it and that I did indeed have a plan. And I did. Since my conversation with Priya, I had been meeting with my realtor friend during lunch breaks. We had visited several rental properties, and I had finally found a small 3-bedroom house only 10 minutes from the hospital and still within the same school district for the twins. The rent stretched my budget to its limit, but I had been approved based on my reliable job history and strong credit score. The lease had been signed the week before, though I had not told anyone, not even Theo and Maya. I did not want to raise their hopes until everything was finalized. The house would be ready for us on November 1st, just 1 week away. I had already arranged for utilities in my name and scheduled delivery of essential furniture. Aunt Carla pressed my hand again and told me to let her know if I needed help. Her support meant more than she could imagine. I had begun to doubt myself, wondering if my parents were right when they accused me of being oversensitive or jealous. Hearing both Priya and Carla confirm that my children were being mistreated gave me the final push of confidence I needed. The next morning, I overheard Colin talking with my father about future plans. Colin said that the contractor expected another 3 months of work and suggested that, with the baby, it might be better for them to simply stay through the holidays. My father warmly reassured him, saying he was always welcome and that this was his home as well. "This is your home." Those were my father's words to Colin, and I wondered if either of my parents remembered that when I moved in, I had been told my stay was only temporary and that I was expected to find my own place as soon as possible. The double standard was so obvious it would have been laughable, if it wasn't slowly breaking my children's hearts. That evening, I took Theo and Maya out for ice cream after dinner, something we rarely did on a weeknight. I needed time with them, away from the suffocating tension in the house. While they enjoyed their cones, I looked at them carefully and told them something important. I said that no matter what their grandparents said or how they behaved, the two of them were amazing, valuable people. I made sure they knew that none of the treatment they were receiving was their fault. Maya, always perceptive, studied me closely. She asked if we were going to move out soon. Her insight surprised me, and I asked what made her think that. She explained that she had noticed I was working far more shifts and that I seemed different, less weighed down by sadness and more focused, more determined. Out of the mouths of children. My daughter had noticed the change in me even before I admitted it to myself. I told them gently to keep being their wonderful selves for just a little longer, promising that things would get better soon, though I wasn't ready to share my plan. They both nodded, and I saw a flicker of hope in their eyes, something I had not seen for far too long. When we returned home, Jenna was loudly complaining about the twins' backpacks being left in the hallway. She scolded me that children needed to learn to pick up after themselves, even though Oliver's stroller, diaper bag, and toys were scattered throughout nearly every common area of the house. I forced a smile, helped my kids move their things, and reminded myself that it would only be a matter of days before we were out of there. What I didn't realize was that things were about to erupt, forcing me to act sooner than I had planned. The following Tuesday, I was scheduled for a 12-hour hospital shift. The pediatric ward was overwhelmed that day with 3 new admissions and not enough staff, leaving me covering more patients than usual. During my short lunch break, I finally checked my phone and found multiple urgent texts from both children. Theo had written, "Mom, something weird is happening. Grandpa and Uncle Colin are moving our things." Maya's message read, "Grandma says we have to move to the basement. This is not fair." Another message from Theo followed, "Mom, please come home. They took all our stuff downstairs." And then Maya again, "I hate it here. The basement is cold, gross, and there are spiders." My heart pounded as I dialed home, but no one answered. I tried both of the twins' phones. Again, no answer. Desperate, I texted Maya to stay calm, told them both I loved them, and promised I was coming home as soon as I could. I quickly explained the emergency to my supervisor, who kindly arranged coverage for the last 4 hours of my shift. Even so, it took another hour to finish charting and hand over my patients before I could leave. The 20-minute drive home felt endless. My mind ran through every possibility, and none of them were good. Could my parents truly have forced my children into the basement, the unfinished, poorly insulated basement that sometimes leaked during heavy rain? When I pulled into the driveway, I paused to take a deep breath. I needed to stay calm and clear-headed before I walked inside. The sight that greeted me confirmed my worst fears. Theo and Maya were sitting together on the couch, their eyes red and swollen from crying. My mother was in the kitchen with Jenna, sipping tea casually as though nothing had happened. Colin and my father were nowhere in sight. I rushed to my children immediately, asking what was going on. Maya clung to me and said through tears that their belongings had been moved to the basement without anyone asking them. She told me they had been told they didn't deserve the better rooms upstairs. Theo, his voice low and miserable, added that Grandpa had said Uncle Colin's family needed more space because they were more important right now. I held them close, forcing myself to keep calm for their sake, even as fury rose inside me. I told them I would go speak with their grandmother and went into the kitchen. My mother barely looked up as she commented that I was home earlier than expected. I asked her directly why my children's things had been moved downstairs. Jenna sipped her tea and said they had needed to make adjustments for Oliver's nursery and for her new home office, now that she worked remotely. I kept my voice quiet but firm, asking if they truly thought it acceptable to move Theo and Maya into the unfinished basement without even speaking to me first. My mother finally met my eyes and told me it had been the logical solution. She explained that older children could adapt more easily than a baby and added that their other grandson deserved the best rooms. She justified it further by saying that Oliver was home all day while my kids were away at school. Her words left me stunned. I told her plainly that my children deserved safe and comfortable bedrooms as much as Oliver did. She dismissed me as dramatic, claiming the basement was perfectly fine since they had moved the beds there. I reminded her the basement had mold in one corner, got freezing at night, had an unfinished ceiling, and only one tiny window that barely opened. She waved it off, saying they would manage, insisting that family life required sacrifice. To her, sacrifice clearly meant only my children's. At that moment, my father and Colin came in through the back door. My father greeted me casually, saying they had made some changes to the living situation and needed to talk. I replied that I could already see what they had done, pointing out that they had moved my children's belongings without my permission. Colin shrugged and said they needed the upstairs space, explaining that Oliver was becoming more mobile and needed room to grow, and that Jenna needed quiet for her calls. I countered firmly that my children needed appropriate bedrooms as well. My father brushed my concerns aside, saying the basement was fine because he had added a few extra lights and thrown down some old carpet scraps. They should be grateful they even have a place to stay. My father's words hit like a slap. For the first time, I truly saw him. This man who had raised me, whose approval I had chased for years, had just revealed how little value he placed on me and my children. I reminded them that Theo had asthma and that the basement was damp with visible mold, conditions that could trigger a dangerous attack. Colin rolled his eyes and told me I was overreacting as usual. He claimed children were resilient, adding that both he and Jenna had grown up in far worse environments. He glanced at her for confirmation, and she nodded along. Yet I knew she had been raised in a 5-bedroom house in an affluent suburb. I looked at the 4 adults who had made this decision, searching for even a hint of remorse or empathy. There was none. In their eyes, this arrangement was perfectly logical. The golden child's family deserved the best, while my children could make do with the leftovers. I walked back into the living room where Theo and Maya were waiting anxiously. Their faces lifted toward me with hope, trusting that I would make everything right. In that moment, something solidified within me, a calm certainty about what had to happen. I smiled at them, genuinely, despite the situation, and spoke 3 words that changed everything: pack your bags. They looked puzzled, but I nodded and reassured them. I told them to trust me, to pack what mattered most, and promised we would come back for the rest later. My father followed me in and overheard. He threw up his hands and said I was being dramatic, insisting that no one was forcing me to leave. Still smiling, I turned to him and said, "No, Dad. You have just made it painfully clear where my children and I stand in this family, and we deserve better." My father sputtered in disbelief, asking what I meant, while Theo and Maya glanced between us with wide eyes. I told the kids gently to go upstairs and fill their backpacks with their most important things, assuring them we would collect the rest tomorrow. They hurried off just as my mother walked into the room. She demanded to know what nonsense I was speaking, insisting I couldn't just walk out simply because I didn't get my way. Colin and Jenna entered too, Oliver perched on Colin's hip, as though the entire group had gathered for the showdown. I explained calmly that this had nothing to do with getting my way. It was about respect and consideration, 2 things that had been absent in this house for far too long. My father raised his voice, saying they had given me a roof for nearly 2 years and asking how I could dare speak of a lack of consideration. I agreed that yes, they had provided us shelter and that I had been grateful, but I reminded him that I had also contributed financially, handled most of the cooking and cleaning, and ensured my children followed their rules. Then I told him clearly, today they had crossed a line. Jenna scoffed, brushing it off as nothing more than a bedroom rearrangement and calling me oversensitive. I turned to her and asked if she would feel the same way if someone had moved her child into an unsuitable space without consulting her first. She had no reply. My mother insisted again that the basement was perfectly adequate. She argued that she and my father had raised both me and Colin without the special accommodations children seemed to need today. I repeated firmly that the basement contained mold, that Theo had asthma, and that it was damp, cold, and unsafe, with inadequate emergency exits. It was not a legal bedroom under any housing code. My father waved a hand dismissively, muttering that such codes were just government overreach. The absurdity nearly made me laugh. Safety regulations were dismissed as overreach only when they inconvenienced him. I was certain he would feel differently if it were him being forced into such conditions. Colin then smirked and asked where I thought I would go. He implied I hadn't saved anything, criticizing my so-called spending habits. And there it was, the false assumption they all shared. They believed I was dependent, irresponsible, incapable of standing on my own. I answered quietly but firmly. I told them they were wrong. I explained that from the day I moved in, I had been saving. I had been working extra shifts and building my emergency fund. 3 weeks earlier, I had even signed a lease on a house nearby. The silence that followed was thick and, for once, satisfying. My mother recovered first. Her voice trembled with manufactured hurt as she accused me of planning to leave without telling them. I clarified that I had planned to give proper notice the following week, since the house would not be ready until November 1st, but that today's events had forced me to move sooner. Colin cut in, insisting I couldn't be serious and demanding to know where I planned to stay until then. I told him it was no longer his concern, though I already had a backup plan. Priya from work had kindly offered her guest room if we needed it. My father's face turned a furious shade of red. He shouted that after everything they had done for me, this was how I repaid them, by sneaking behind their backs and storming out over what he described as a minor disagreement. I repeated his words with disbelief. I asked if he truly considered it a minor disagreement to move my children into an unsafe basement without my knowledge or consent, and to tell them to their faces that they did not deserve the same care and comfort as their cousin. I told him firmly that this was not minor, it was a betrayal. That is a fundamental statement about how you value both them and me. Maya and Theo came back downstairs, each carrying a backpack and a small bag. Maya clutched her clarinet case tightly, while Theo held onto his favorite drawing supplies and the stuffed dragon he had slept with since he was 3 years old. "We are ready, Mom," Maya said, her voice stronger than I had heard it in weeks. "This is ridiculous," my mother snapped. "You cannot seriously be leaving right now." "We are," I confirmed. "We will come back tomorrow to collect the rest of our things once everyone has had time to calm down. If you walk out that door, do not expect to be welcomed back with open arms," my father warned. I looked at him sadly and replied, "I stopped expecting that a long time ago, Dad." Colin stepped forward, as if realizing for the first time that I truly meant to leave. "Come on, sis. Let us talk about this rationally. There is no need to make a scene in front of the kids. My children have already been shown exactly where they stand in this family's hierarchy," I responded firmly. "There is nothing more to discuss tonight." I helped Theo and Maya carry their bags to the car as the rest of my family stood on the porch, their faces a mixture of disbelief and anger. They had been so certain of my dependence on them, so confident in their control, that they could not even process what was happening. As I started the car, my mother rushed to my window. "Lila, please, you are overreacting. Come back inside and we will work something out." "We will talk tomorrow, when I come to collect our belongings," I told her steadily. "But where will you go?" she asked, and for the first time, genuine concern broke through her indignation. "Somewhere my children are valued," I answered simply before pulling away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Theo and Maya gazing back at the house we had lived in for nearly 2 years. What struck me was that their expressions were not sad, they were relieved. "Are we really moving into our own house?" Theo asked hesitantly. "Almost," I told him. "We already have a house waiting for us, but we cannot move in until next week. Tonight we are going to stay with my friend Priya from work." "Is it because of what Grandpa and Grandma did?" Maya asked softly. I chose my words carefully. "It is because we deserve to live in a place where everyone is treated with kindness and respect." I had already been planning for us to move out, but what happened today showed me that we needed to leave sooner. "I did not like how they talked about us," Theo said quietly. "Like we were not important." My heart ached at his words. "You are both incredibly important," I assured them. "And anyone who cannot see that does not deserve to be part of your lives." When we arrived at Priya's house, she welcomed us warmly. She had already set up the guest room with an air mattress for the twins next to the queen bed I would use. She had even bought ice cream and rented a movie for us to watch together. As Theo and Maya sat with their bowls, picking at the ice cream with subdued energy, Priya pulled me aside. "I am proud of you," she said simply. "It takes courage to set boundaries with family." "I just wish I had done it sooner," I admitted quietly. "Before they hurt my children like this." "You are doing it now," she reminded me. "And that is what matters." That night, as the twins slept beside me in the unfamiliar room, I felt a storm of emotions: grief for what family should have been, anger for the way we had been treated, anxiety about the uncertain future. Yet beneath all of it was an undeniable peace. For the first time in years, I had stood firmly for myself and my children without hesitation or second-guessing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: returning for our things, enduring the inevitable guilt and manipulation, finalizing the move to our new home. But tonight, watching Theo and Maya rest peacefully, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. We were finally breaking free. The next morning, I called in and requested a personal day. Priya offered to let the twins stay with her while I went to gather our belongings, but I refused. "They need to see this through," I explained. "It is important for them to know we are doing this together." We arrived at my parents' house at 10 o'clock in the morning, knowing everyone would be home. My father answered the door with a scowl, though his expression softened slightly when he saw the twins. "Have you come to apologize for your tantrum?" he asked coldly. "No," I replied evenly. "We have come to get our things." His face hardened again. "Your mother has been upset all night because of your dramatic exit." "I am sorry she is upset," I said truthfully. Despite everything, I had never wanted to hurt my parents. I only needed to protect my children. "But we are still moving out." He stepped aside reluctantly, letting us in. My mother sat in the living room, her eyes red and swollen from crying or a lack of sleep. Colin and Jenna were noticeably absent. "Where are Colin and Jenna?" I asked. "They took Oliver to the park," my mother replied. "They thought it would be less stressful if they weren't here while you gathered your things." At least they had shown that much consideration. "Theo, Maya, go ahead and pack up your room," I instructed. "Remember what we talked about in the car: just take what you truly need and love. We can replace the rest." As they headed upstairs, my mother turned to me. "I cannot believe you are doing this to us." "I am not doing anything to you," I corrected. "I am doing something for myself and for my children." "We have given you everything," she insisted. "A place to stay when you had nowhere else, help with the children, emotional support during your divorce." "And I have been grateful," I acknowledged. "But gratitude does not mean my children should be treated as less valuable than Oliver." "We never said that," she protested. "You did not have to say it. Your actions have made it perfectly clear." My father entered the room, pacing with agitation. "This is about Colin, isn't it? You have always been jealous of him." I shook my head firmly. "This is not about Colin. It is about Theo and Maya being moved to an unsafe basement without my knowledge or consent. It is about you saying outright that Oliver deserves the best room simply because he is Colin's son." "You are twisting our words," my mother accused. "Am I?" I asked. "You said, and I quote, that our other grandson deserves the best rooms. What else could that possibly mean, if not that my children deserve less?" She had no reply. I went upstairs to help the twins finish packing. Most of their clothes fit into the 2 large suitcases I had brought. Theo carefully wrapped his favorite books and the science kit he had received for his birthday. Maya packed her sports equipment along with the jewelry box her father had given her the previous Christmas. When we returned downstairs with the first load, my father stood waiting at the door. "Where exactly are you going?" he demanded. "This so-called house you claim to have rented, where is it?" "We are staying with a friend until our house is ready next week," I explained, though I owed him no such information. "And how do you plan to afford rent on a nurse's salary?" he asked skeptically. The condescension in his tone made something inside me snap. I set down the bags and faced him directly. "Dad, I earn $65,000 a year as a pediatric nurse. I have excellent credit, minimal debt, and I have been saving steadily for nearly 2 years. I am fully capable of supporting my family without your help." He looked genuinely shocked. It was clear he had no idea what I earned or how carefully I managed my finances. He had simply assumed I was struggling because that fit the narrative he preferred to believe. The rental market is extremely tight right now, my mother interjected. How did you even find a place? I have been looking for months, I said. I have friends, I have connections. Just because I didn't tell you my plans does not mean I didn't have them. We made several trips, loading everything into my car. My parents watched silently, the reality of our departure slowly sinking in. Once the last of what we wanted was packed, I did a final walkthrough to ensure nothing important was left behind. In the kitchen, I found my mother making coffee, her movements stiff and mechanical. We are heading out now, I told her. She turned, her eyes brimming with tears. I do not understand why you are doing this. We are family. Yes, we are, I agreed quietly. And that is why this hurts so much. Family should make one another feel valued and respected. Theo and Maya have not felt that here for a very long time. That is not true, she whispered weakly. Mom, yesterday you told them they did not deserve the same quality of rooms as their cousin. How do you think that made them feel? She looked away. We did not mean it like that. How else could you have meant it? I asked. She had no answer. As we prepared to leave, my father made one last attempt. This is a mistake, Lila. You are letting pride get in the way of what is best for your children. No, Dad, I replied firmly. For the first time in years, I am choosing what is truly best for my children, even if it means losing your approval. Theo and Maya gave their grandparents stiff, uncertain goodbyes. I could see the conflict in their eyes, taught to love and respect these people, but already scarred by how casually they had been dismissed. As we drove away, Maya asked, "Will we ever see Grandma and Grandpa again?" Yes, I assured her. But things will be different. We will only visit when we are treated with respect and always on our terms. The next few days at Priya's house were peaceful. The twins seemed lighter, laughing and playing in ways I had not seen for months. I took a day off to finalize the details for our new home, meeting with the landlord to get the keys early so we could begin moving in before the official lease start date. The house was small but perfect for us, 3 bedrooms, a tiny backyard, and a kitchen filled with natural light. It was still within the same school district, so the twins would not have to switch schools, and it was even closer to the hospital than my parents' home, shortening my commute. On Friday, we moved our belongings. Priya and several coworkers showed up to help, turning what could have been a stressful day into something that felt like a celebration. By evening, the beds were assembled, the kitchen was set up, and the living room had enough furniture for us to sit comfortably together. That night, after pizza boxes were cleared away and the twins had gone to bed in their own rooms for the first time in nearly 2 years, I sat alone in the quiet of our new living room. Only then did I finally let myself cry. Not from sadness, though there was some of that, but from relief and a bittersweet sense of accomplishment. My phone had buzzed all day with messages from my parents, alternating between angry accusations and tearful pleas for me to come home. I replied only once, letting them know that we were safe, settled, and that I would reach out when I was ready to talk. That Monday, my parents showed up at our new house unannounced. I had just returned from dropping the twins at school and was preparing to leave for my shift when the doorbell rang. Reluctantly, I let them in. "How did you find our address?" I asked. "Your Aunt Carla told us," my father admitted. "She thought we should try to reconcile." I made them coffee and watched as they surveyed our modest, but comfortable new home. "It is smaller than I expected," my mother remarked. "It is perfect for the 3 of us," I replied. "Lila, we want you to come home," my father said directly. "This has gone on long enough." "This is our home now," I answered firmly. "But the children need their grandparents," my mother insisted. "And their uncle and cousin. What they need," I countered, "is to be treated with respect and love. When you can provide that consistently, you are welcome in their lives." "We have always loved them," she protested. "Love is not just a feeling, Mom. Love is shown in the way you treat people. It is in the choices you make that reveal what you truly value." They stayed for nearly an hour, moving through the usual cycle, guilt trips, appeals to family unity, and finally a grudging acknowledgement that maybe they had been insensitive. "We did not realize how it looked from your perspective," my father conceded. "We thought we were just helping Colin and Jenna through a difficult time." "And I understand that," I said. "But you helped them at the expense of my children's well-being and safety. That is something I cannot ignore." When they left, we had a tentative agreement. They would respect our new living situation, and we would visit for Sunday dinner in 2 weeks. It was only a small step, but it was something. In the weeks that followed, news of our departure spread through the extended family. Most relatives were supportive, many of them having witnessed the favoritism at family gatherings. Aunt Carla, especially, became a regular visitor, often bringing homemade cookies and showing genuine interest in Theo and Maya's lives. At work, I was offered an unexpected opportunity, a promotion to charge nurse on the pediatric floor. It came with a significant salary increase and a more stable schedule with fewer overnight shifts, giving me more time with the twins. Meanwhile, word reached me through relatives that Colin and Jenna were struggling. Without me around to quietly shoulder chores and help with Oliver, they found it difficult to keep up. My mother, now in her 60s, was exhausted trying to manage both the baby and the household without my help. When we did attend Sunday dinner 2 weeks later, the atmosphere was strained but civil. Colin and Jenna were far less smug than usual, perhaps finally realizing that my presence had made their lives easier in ways they had never acknowledged. Most importantly, Theo and Maya were happier than I had seen them in years. Theo's teacher reported that his focus and participation had improved significantly. Maya thrived in her clarinet lessons, practicing freely in her own room without fear of being told to stop. One night, as I tucked Maya into bed, she said something that confirmed I had made the right decision. "I like our house, Mom," she murmured sleepily. "I feel like I can breathe here." Out of all the validation I could have asked for, her simple words meant the most. We had built a home where my children could breathe freely, both literally and figuratively, and that was worth every struggle we had endured. 6 months after leaving my parents' house, our lives had transformed more than I could have imagined. Our small rental had become a true home, filled with laughter, artwork on the refrigerator, and the joyful chaos of family life. Theo and Maya had blossomed, their confidence returning as they settled into an environment where they were valued and respected. My promotion gave me not only a better schedule and higher income, but also meaningful responsibilities that challenged and fulfilled me. For the first time as an adult, I felt like I was thriving instead of simply surviving. Our relationship with my parents became cautiously cordial. Sunday dinners shifted to a monthly tradition, with boundaries established and mostly respected. My mother slowly began to recognize the favoritism that had poisoned our family dynamics, though my father continued to struggle with his role in it. During one of her visits, my mother sat at our kitchen table, looking older than her years. "I have been thinking a lot about last fall," she admitted. "I did not realize how much we were hurting Theo and Maya." "What made you see it?" I asked, genuinely curious about her change of heart. She sighed deeply. "After you left, nothing was the same." "Colin and Jenna stayed for another month," my mother admitted. "But without you here, I was overwhelmed trying to manage the house and care for Oliver. I started to realize how much you had been doing, how much I had taken for granted. It was the closest thing to an apology I had received, and I accepted it as such." She went on. "Colin and Jenna began arguing constantly about childcare, about the renovation that never seemed to finish, about money. Before Christmas, they moved back to their house even though the work was incomplete. I was not surprised. Colin and Jenna had always projected a united front in public, but I had glimpsed cracks in their relationship before. Without my parents' constant approval and my quiet support, those cracks had apparently widened. "How are they doing now?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine concern. "They are in couples counseling," my mother admitted. "Your father dismisses it as nonsense, but I think it might help them." Jenna went back to full-time work, and they're struggling with child-care arrangements. I nodded, feeling a brief twinge of sympathy. Parenting was difficult under the best of circumstances, and their relationship had never seemed to rest on a strong foundation. The most meaningful changes, however, were in my children. Theo's anxiety had nearly disappeared, and his natural creativity had re-emerged. He joined an after-school art program and thrived under the mentorship of a patient teacher who recognized his talent. Maya had earned a spot in the advanced band at school and was already talking about trying out for the soccer team in the spring. One evening, as we sat together working on a puzzle, one of the quiet rituals we had built in our new home, Maya raised a question that had been weighing on her. "Mom, why do you think Grandma and Grandpa treated us differently than Oliver?" she asked, fitting a piece into place. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes people hold on to fixed ideas about others, and those ideas make it hard for them to see clearly. Grandma and Grandpa always saw Uncle Colin as special and worthy of extra attention. When he had Oliver, those feelings transferred to him. "But we are their grandchildren too," Theo pointed out. "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And they do love you. They just did not know how to show it equally or fairly." "Is that why we left?" Maya asked. "Because they were not fair?" "We left because everyone deserves to be treated with respect and kindness," I explained. When that was not happening, we needed to create a space where we could thrive. Theo nodded thoughtfully. "I like it better here anyway. At Grandma and Grandpa's house, I always felt like I was in the way." "You are never in the way here," I assured him. "This is your home, and you belong here exactly as you are." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but I was struck by how maturely they were processing everything. Children were incredibly resilient when given safety, consistency, and honesty. By April, an opportunity one had barely dared to hope for appeared. A small 3-bedroom house in our neighborhood went up for sale, priced just within my reach thanks to my promotion and careful saving. After consulting with a mortgage broker and reviewing my finances, I made an offer. To my surprise and joy, it was accepted. Becoming a homeowner had once seemed like a distant dream, something I imagined far in the future. Now, less than a year after leaving my parents' house, it was becoming reality. The house needed some cosmetic updates, but it was structurally sound, in a safe location, and most importantly, it would be ours. When I told the twins, their excitement was contagious. They immediately began making plans, how to decorate their rooms, what color the front door should be, where we could plant a garden in the small backyard. "Can we get a dog once we move in?" Theo asked hopefully. "We will see," I replied, not ready to commit, though the idea warmed me. A dog would complete our little family in so many ways. The process of buying the house unexpectedly brought my father back into my life in a different capacity. Despite the strain between us, he had experience with home buying and offered to review the inspection report with me. "The roof has at least 5 years left," he noted as we sat at my kitchen table, studying the paperwork. "But you should budget to replace the water heater sooner rather than later." His practical advice was genuinely helpful, and for the first time in years, I appreciated his involvement. He was making an effort to support me without criticizing or trying to control my decisions. It was a small but significant shift in our relationship. "I am proud of you, Lila," my father said unexpectedly as he was leaving. "Buying a house on your own is no small accomplishment." The words I had longed to hear for most of my life caught me completely off guard. "Thank you, Dad," I managed to reply. "I know I have not always been fair," he continued hesitantly. "Your mother and I have been talking a lot about how we handled things. I cannot change the past, but I would like to do better moving forward." It was not a full apology, but coming from my proud and stubborn father, it was monumental. "I would like that too," I told him honestly. The day we closed on the house, Theo and Maya were at school. I signed the papers alone, but snapped a photo of the keys so I could show them the moment they got home. As I stood in the empty living room of our new house, my house, I felt a surge of emotions so powerful that tears filled my eyes. 2 years earlier, I had been a newly divorced mother, uncertain of the future and dependent on my parents' conditional support. Now I was a homeowner, moving forward in my career and, most importantly, giving my children the stable, loving home they deserved. The journey had been painful, forcing me to face hard truths about my family and myself. I had learned that setting boundaries was not selfish but necessary, that protecting my children sometimes required walking away, and that my worth was never defined by anyone else's opinion. We moved into our home on a bright Saturday in May with the help of friends, colleagues, and, surprisingly, even my parents. The atmosphere was celebratory as furniture was arranged, Boxes were unpacked, and pizza was shared with everyone who had lent a hand. By evening, when only my parents remained, we sat together on my new back porch, watching Theo and Maya explore the yard. "This is a good home," my mother said softly. "You have done well, Lila." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the compliment without hesitation or doubt. As the sun sank on our first day in the new house, I reflected on the path that had brought us here. The pain of that October day, when my children had been deemed less worthy than their cousin, had become the very spark that set change into motion. What had once seemed like the end had turned out to be a beginning of self-respect, independence, and teaching my children what it truly meant to stand up for yourself and for those you love. Family, I had come to understand, was not about blood alone or about obligation. True family was built on mutual respect, on consistent kindness, and on choosing to value each person for who they really were. My children and I had created our own strong and supportive family unit, and we had chosen to open our circle only to those who treated us with dignity. That night, as I tucked Theo and Maya into bed in their very own rooms, in our very own house, I felt an unshakable peace. We had weathered the storm, and at last, we stood together on solid ground. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your family's well-being? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more real-life accounts of overcoming family struggles. Remember, sometimes the bravest choice you can make is to pack your bags and create the life you and your children deserve. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to stand up for what is right, especially when it is hardest to do so.